And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Ricky. Ricky spent the last few years researching into dogmen and learning their behavioral patterns. He's come up with some pretty interesting information regarding that. Before we bring him on, though, if you've ever had an experience you want to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to the website, tinfoiltales.com, and go to the contact section. Either way, we'll get the message to me, and we'll get you scheduled for a future episode. If you want to help the podcast out, please continue to share it around. Word of mouth is helping the podcast grow. It's definitely appreciated anytime you share it around. Brings more eyes and ears of the podcast. You can also leave a 5-star review on any of the platforms you listen to Tinfoil Tales at. If you write one, I'll make sure to read it on an upcoming episode. You can also help the podcast out by joining the Patreon. Get access to ad-free content, early access to all of the episodes, plus exclusive content available only on the Patreon. It's only $1.99 a month. So if that's something you'd be interested in, make sure to check out the Patreon. Be sure to follow us on all the social medias. I pretty much have an account now on almost every social media out there. I don't use them that often, but it is there. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring Ricky on. Been looking forward to talking with him. Hope you guys enjoy the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take the time to welcome my guest today, Ricky. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
You're welcome.
A little bit about yourself.
When the whole Dogman thing started, I was a correctional officer in the state of Wisconsin several years, maximum prison. I also deal with, dog training, with all aspects of it, from police work, apprehension, pets. And love to hike, love the outdoors. But right now, I own 10.15 acres in Tennessee, which is out in the middle of nowhere. The closest town, I think, is 39 minutes away. At least a town that you can go and buy stuff. Just the other little town has nothing in it, pretty much. I like life itself. I was a pet transporter after I left corrections. I wanted to spend more time with my family, so I built a business of transporting animals throughout the state, which also helped me out in research, obviously, because the more you get to know behaviors, the more you'll understand or what to look for. So every time I had an opportunity on my trips throughout the country, I was able to stop at certain places, research here, research there, talking to the researchers. And that's pretty much my life right now.
What got you into the whole Dogman type thing, like the phenomena involved with it? Did you have like an experience or see something, or how'd that happen?
Yes. It all happened strangely. And I'll explain that. One night, my wife always bought these bottles from Walmart, where you buy the 42 packs, whatever. And so the pack was in the back of my car, and I went out, to go get the pack. And out in front of the driveway, we had a long driveway. It was shaped kind of like an H. So there was a neighbor next to me, and then across from that driveway was another house, which was another neighbor. We were all like in a 3 to 4 acre plot. So all the land was kind of divided and stuff like that. But anyways, I went to go get the pack of water, and I saw eye shine, and these eye shines were coming towards me. So I found it curious. At first I thought it was a stray cat that was around, but um, the stray cat was really skittish, So the idea of it coming to me all of a sudden left my mind, because I'm like, the cat wouldn't come to me because I'm new here, and it's just a skittish cat. So I pay attention. I had a headlamp on me. It wasn't a very strong headlamp, so it was I could only see a certain point. So all I saw was the eye shine, and that was pretty much it. But this thing kept on coming towards me, which again sparked my curiosity. So at one point, I put the pack of water down, and I walked slightly towards it. And when I walked towards it, it walked backwards. So that sparked even more my curiosity, because it wasn't like turning to run away. It just scooted backwards. And that, like I said, it sparked the curiosity. So like I kind of moved forward a little bit, and it moved backwards. And I went back to the water pack, and it moved forward again. So I went back towards it. At one point, I just said, I got to find out what this thing is. And so I went forward towards it, and it scooted back, completely in a straight line, right back to there was a tree right next to the entrance of the driveway. And when it got to the tree, the eye shine went from being low to the ground to probably 6 feet up, looked at me, and then just climbed the tree really fast. And I think whatever it was at that moment in time in my brain, I'm thinking, this thing, man, knows how to climb trees, because they climb that tree really fast. And you can hear some of the branches break off and fall off. And then it just perched itself on top. But again, all I'm seeing is eye shine. It's dark, man. I just, went, grabbed my pack of water, brought it inside. I went back outside afterwards, but the eye shine was no longer there. At that moment in time, I didn't think it was a dog, man. I don't know what it was. I did call, because it had large eye shine, larger than my dogs at the time. My dogs were, 80 pounds was the heaviest, and its eye shine was a lot larger than my dog's eye shine. But I left it at that, right? A couple of days later, I believe it was a weekend, Saturday or Sunday. We went to go pick up some stuff that you buy at that marketplace on Facebook, and my neighbor had a pickup truck, so we went to go get that, and we started we started talking. And the minute we started talking, I was mentioning to him about, and I was being sarcastic to him, about, telling him about what I had seen, the eye shine and whatnot. And I was being funny with him because I didn't know what the eye shine was. So he begins to tell me a story from a few days prior of him and his wife had gotten up. They were, talking about something, and they went for a walk. Now, I live close to the Horicon Marsh in Wisconsin. And where we lived, there's like half a mile down the road, there's a trail that leads into the Horicon Marsh. So they had walked down, the street, gone to the trail, took the trail probably a mile down, and then turned around and walked back. And as they were walking back, he mentions that there was something paralleling him from the side, there was a slight part woods on the side of the trail, because everything else was cornfields. And, it was just following them. So they, at nighttime, they're city people living out in the country pretty much. So his wife got kind of scared. Even at one point, he tells me that they had prayed because she was really scared. Because this thing was just like breathing heavy and just following them, right? And if they would move, it would move, stuff like that. And so they got to the road, and they're headed home, and he begins to hear like clicks on the floor. And he turns around, he doesn't see nothing, but he has a flashlight. So he flashes into the woods. And the minute he flashes into the woods, he tells me that he sees 5 sets of eye shine and one of the eye shines was red. The other ones were like an amberish type color. Looking at him. So obviously, when he tells me that, the first question I asked him was, "Well, how tall up were these eye shine?" And he goes, he says probably about 6-7 foot off the ground. So obviously, when you say, 6-7 foot off the ground, they're not coyotes. And even though we have reports of wolves on that area, no one has really seen wolves, or at least I haven't seen wolves in that area. So again, they're not coyotes, they're not dogs. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe you had Bigfoots. And I began to bring audio from YouTube for him to listen to, and it was always no, 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 no. And he had mentioned that after they were like making noises back and forth, and at one point they let out a strange like laughter type sound, and then a howl type. But I'm trying to figure out what is he hearing. And so I had gotten into the North American Dogman project. Back then it had 3 vocals, and I believe it was the second one. I played it to him, and I guess that triggered a response, because you can see his eyes just change, and he had goosebumps in his head, on his arms, and he was, "That's kind of it. What is that?" And my brain went, "That's a Dogman." But again, I don't. Not that I didn't believe in Dogman, but it wasn't something that I was into or really looked at much information on it. Okay, cool. There's a Dogman. There's Dogman, and apparently 5 of them. And we went home. We didn't talk much about it, and on that day, that was the end of it. But I think that was that weekend. We would have trash. I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. So that day, I wasn't working that day, and I'm outside with the family, with my wife. I'm doing some stuff, and it's about 5 o'clock at in the evening, and he comes like running towards me, and I don't mean like a full sprint, but he was huffing it towards me, and I'm like, "What the heck's wrong with you?" And so he starts talking to me about something that happened to him at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, "Okay, what happened?" So apparently he put his trash in his back of his pickup truck. He leaves early for work. And since he has to take out the trash, so he wakes up and does everything more earlier. So he puts his trash in the back of his pickup truck and goes towards the front of, the long driveway. And back then we didn't have like bins or nothing. We had bins afterwards, but at that moment in time, we would just put our trash out in the streets, and the pickup truck would come in. The trash truck would come and pick it up. So when he did that, he picks up his trash. He's going around the truck to put it on the curve, and his headlights were like going in and out, in and out, in and out. So in his mind, there's something moving in front of the pickup truck. So he goes around the pickup truck to see what it was, and he was face to face with a Dogman. He froze. He went slowly backwards, got into his pickup truck, and left. So at 5 o'clock when he got home, he's telling me what he had seen, and he described it to the T, and because he was right in front of him, it was right in front of his headlights of his pickup truck. So then for me, that was like, okay, confirmation. We have Dogman in the property. That led to probably a whole year of every weekend. And when I say weekend, I'm saying sometimes it would start Thursday, sometimes it would start Friday. But, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you'd have some type of situation, commotion, visual, audio on the property. And it was like, it started off every weekend, then it went every other weekend, until it kind of tapered off. So we had a lot of experiences there from, one day we were out having a slight bonfire, but it was springtime, and there was a lot of mosquitoes because obviously you live next to the Horicon Marsh. So we decided to not be outside and we threw water on the fire pit, and that obviously, you know how that pops up and starts crackling and stuff. That sparked, I'm going to say, fear into the Dogman, and it rose up from the cornfields. Apparently, it was still watching us. And the part of the back of the cornfields from the house, obviously, they're not tall, and they're stubbles because of the previous year. And on that property, some years they would not even cut them; they would just leave, the stalks the way they were for some apparent reason. They would cut one and not the other. But so at this point in time, they were all little stubbles from the year prior, and because they hadn't plowed that field yet. So it got up, and all because we had back to a point we had the tall. I don't know if it was. I can't say it was grass because it's just bushes and stuff. But so we were able to see it, and then we go back down and up and look at us and look to the side and look down and look up and side to side, and all of a sudden, it ran off. So me and him, we went on the road towards the trail, because we wanted to see what in the world. So we went on the road on the trail, and when we got to the trail, obviously the bushes were a lot more greener and stuff, and I looked at him and said, "Listen, let's not even attempt to try to find this thing, because if it tries to jump us, we won't even know where it's coming from, because you can't see to both sides." And so we just had to come back. And as we're walking back, he goes and says, "Do you hear that?" And I'm like, "No, I don't hear nothing. What are you hearing?" "I think it's behind us." Now, coming back on both sides of the road, there's two culverts. So I wasn't seeing anything, and he's hearing stuff, and I'm like, "I don't know what you're hearing." And we walked home. So as we were home and I'm putting up the hose and stuff like that, this thing ran from one side of the culvert across the street into the property and stood right behind the tree looking at me. So I started screaming his name to come to the front, that it was there. And by the time because he wasn't responding, so I kind of ran towards the back because he was outside. So I ran to the back, like, "Get over here. He's right there." And sure enough, by the time I turned around and got back towards the front, it was gone. So that whole year, obviously, me and my wife had a child, and we had just moved there. So the idea of moving wasn't on the table. And we weren't having bad experiences. We were just having presence of dogmen on the property. Sometimes they would be around when I would take out my dogs, and they would, circle around the cornfields. But for the most part, it wasn't nothing to be, quote, alarmed of. I think the only times is when I got more cocky towards them, and when I say cocky, I mean more courageous in the sense of, okay, you guys been here long enough, you guys haven't done nothing. I did have an experience that brought a feeling of dread, but at the end of the day, nothing did happen, so that only brought more courage in dealing with them, I'm going to say. And when I say dealing with them, I'm not saying I was trying to be friends with them, but it was just, when they were out, I wasn't like scared of being outside. Because in my mind, if you guys were going to do something, you guys were going to do it a long time ago. But what led me to was to explore more. And I tried looking up in social media, different Facebook groups, and everything that I've encountered on social media was completely like left field or really incorrect. And I knew it was incorrect because of what I was experiencing. So, for instance, one of the first things that came to my attention and being the property is that once the corn started getting, coming in, the top of the heads were being cut off. and the plant wasn't, the stalk of the corn wasn't bent over. And I specifically remember, even to this day, that during that year they were there, we had no rabbits, we had no deer, we had only birds that would come in early, and that was it. During that whole year, and at one point I even talked to my wife, don't you notice you don't see rabbits anymore? Or, you don't see nothing around? And, we all agreed that was strange. But obviously with them there, I'm assuming that all the animals decided to just take a hike. But anyways, the corn was being popped off, basically. And so my theory, my thought back then at that moment was they're eating the corn, which kind of goes contradictory with that Dogmen are complete carnivores. And I'm like, wait, if they eat corn, what other vegetation can they eat? So that led more research, more ideas, and because I was in corrections, I kind of was able to read in between the lines when it comes to people posting some things. So I would reach out to specific people, and sure enough, the people that I reached out to were actually landowners, homeowners that had Dogman on the property, and some of these people had, experiences with them for years, generations. And so I began to ask questions, and I began to ask questions from people in the East Coast, and I would ask the same questions to people in the West Coast, and I knew I was onto something because the reply was the same. And again, people that had generational experiences with them on the property, since they were kids or all their adult lives or, whatnot. And I would ask, like, one of the questions that I would ask was, hey, did your Dogman like watermelons, for instance? And I would ask that on somebody who lived in the South towards the East, and I would ask the same question towards an individual who lived up north towards the West, and the reply was always the same: yes. One even would have to plant a slight different, vegetable garden to the side, because they would take from their own vegetable garden. So they would kind of have to do a slight different one to the side, and, they would take from that versus their own, which I found very interesting. So it just confirmed for me as I began to do these things and collect data, that they were not strictly carnivores. They were more omnivores. Yes, probably more towards the meat side, but they searched out and looked for other forms of food. Then I began, like I said, because all I ever studied was behavior. Everything was strictly on behavior. Because I lived on a property. I wanted to know how to keep my family safe. I wanted to know how to keep myself safe. So I began to jot down when something was done, when something was not done, what happened after I did this, or what happened after they did this and this other thing happened, and stuff like that. And I remember back then, I was new to the Dogman Encounters podcast, and I began to investigate, research every podcast. I mean, not every episode, not from that podcast. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't listen to it. I would literally break it down behavioral wise. And because of my years in training dogs and other animals and, in corrections, I literally broke down every episode in my head on paper. And by a certain number of episodes, you come to realize that the behaviors were the same, that this and this were the same, that the response to this was the same as the response to that. So I took that into the field, and lo and behold, able to duplicate a lot of responses, a lot of behaviors through that. And when I began to hear experiences from, one-time eyewitness or an eyewitness that was having for the first time experiences, I wanted to work with certain of those individuals because in my mind, I had something in my mind. Wait a minute, I'm duplicating this. I'm seeing these behaviors. I don't think they're there for what they think they're there for and stuff like that. And I wanted to work with, a person that was having experiences. Years later, after I started, there was a young man who had a podcast, and he had an eyewitness from the UK who had been suffering with a dogman that had been broke their windows, taken off some of the part of the roof, thrown rocks at the house, acting what most people would call aggressive, right? For the whole year. So at that time, I had been talking to another researcher over because they had better connection to some of these individuals. And so she was listening to me, and at one point she mentioned to the podcast, I don't think he's crazy. I think he's onto something. So the podcaster hooked us up on a three-way call with this individual from the UK. And we began to talk. And I began to ask questions, just like I asked questions in an investigation, right, in the prison system. And it took me about probably a day, 2 days. And all of a sudden, as she's talking, it hit me. And, so she had mentioned something that wasn't part of the whole scenario, but that triggered another question in me. So she was having a medical issue. And I asked her, well, when did this medical issue start? Before or after the Dogman? And the person says, slightly after. No, before. So her medical issue started and slightly after the Dogman showed up. So I asked other questions about her home structure. So long story short, what was going on was that her medical conditions was causing hormonal changes. So her female products were being put into a trash that was being left outside. And then the house had other plumbing issues. So when they would use the bathroom, it wouldn't flush properly. So the smell would stay in the pipes. And a lot of times the husband had to open up certain valves and flush certain things out to have the plumbing flushed. So having that knowledge, I told her it was a simple solution about fixing this and fixing that, and make sure you throw, when you take your kids out to school, take all your sanitary pads and whatever and throw them out, and a whole flush of whatever, the pipes and what not to do and what to do. And so and we waited. And, one day I sent her a message on Messenger. I think it was like a week after, maybe 1 or 2 weeks after. And I asked her, hey, how is everything going? Her response was, great. Nothing has happened. And until this day, nothing has happened. So then that responded to, wait a minute. So you're telling me that my brain over here, my house, right? So her problem caused the Dogman to respond. Why? So then that became a point of research. Why? Why would our problems cause a Dogman, right, to give attention towards our property? And that became the focus point. And there was a lot of theories behind the why, right? And one day, this is in Illinois. I had picked up another co-researcher teammate. We went to a park. Now, little story why I was at that park was because the week prior, that weekend that I picked him up, I had been pinpointing where certain sightings had been. So I was trying to track their movements on a specific area. So there had been certain encounters and certain situations and certain howls in a specific area. So I was trying to track, their movement patterns. And so once the weekend came, I picked up my teammate to go look at these places and these patterns. And when we got back to the original encounter, there was he goes and says that a person who lives in that street that was across from the park, it was a park / boat dock, and the park was like towards the left side of where the houses were at. But anyways, he says that he would smell foul smell, like rotten meat or whatever, across from his house, which was part of the park. So I stopped. I parked. We got out. I left every equipment that I had in my car. We just went out to see if there was any tracks on the trail that was there or whatnot. And this was in February. I remember it was in February, but it had rained like 2 or 3 days prior. So I was expecting the floor to be slightly muddy, or at least softer. So I wanted to see if there was any tracks there. And we did find a partial track of something possible unknown. And then I went into the trail. It had a little bank, and then it in the summertime that would have been marsh, right? You wouldn't have been able to walk on it. That would have been soft. But due to it was February and it had already gotten cold again, it was solid. So I started walking there, and as I'm walking towards the river, I see a big black head. And I looked up, saw it, and the minute it saw me, I saw it, it ducked. So as I'm looking towards that area, I'm yelling at my teammate, behind me, look behind me, do you see something? I have one in front of me, look behind me. And all of a sudden I hear from him, yes, he's behind you, he's on that side, he's right there. So all I can say to him was, pay attention to him, make sure he doesn't move towards me because I have one in front of me. All of a sudden, these two things began, and these were both Dogman, began to semicircle, making popping sounds and different vocalizations in front of me, from left to right and right to left. So my teammate goes and says, I think you better get out of there. So I started walking backwards as these things kept on, and you can hear the movement, you can hear them making these popping sounds and whatnot. I moved back, and now when I'm getting close towards, the bank that leads up to the trail, I'm kind of, mad at my teammate. Damn it, I don't have my phone with me. I don't have nothing with me. This is stupid. They're right there, and they're making these noises, and I can't have nothing. So my phone would have been connected to Bionic Tooth and for the recording and stuff like that. So I looked at him and said, wait a minute. So I grabbed the other phone that I had, and I went back and I started recording. And sure enough, and I can send you the audio if you like, I recorded a huff from them, which in the audio, you'll hear the huff and you'll hear my teammate goes, there you go. And as soon as that happened, I stayed there for a couple of seconds more, and I moved back, and we left. We got back, but this is a very important part. When I'm there, I'm looking at a house. This is at 1:30 in the afternoon, and I'm seeing houses across the street. And I'm saying to myself, why? Why would I have houses in front to an elusive creature who's making all these types of noises and running back and forth right in front of the house, basically? Because this is not a half a mile down the road. This is like, I can see the house right there. And I was like, and I'm telling my teammate, why? Well, this is confusing. Why would an elusive creature or cryptid be making so much noise when there's a house right in front of them? Then my other side kicked in. What I know about nature, what I know about animals, what I know about dogs, what I know about, just the basics. I looked at him and says, the only reason a wild animal, a dog, a person would act stupid and quote unquote blow their cover is if they have young with them. And my teammate goes, well, that makes sense, but there's only the island there, and there has to be a den there. And due to the fact that I'm walking towards that area is the only reason they would blow their cover. That was in my mind. So I went back home. I went back home and I began to began to message every eyewitness that I knew. And sure enough, every eyewitness that I talked to saw or interacted. And when I say interacted, means that, you know, the pup would do something in the property or something. All of them had pups. All of them had pups when they were going through the things. At one point in time, they would see pups, younger ones. So I'm saying, so that hit my brain again. I'm like, wait, time out. So you're telling me that you're going through an experience, you know, interaction with Dogman, and at one point in time you're seeing pups. So is there a den? The next question was, have you ever seen a den or a mound in your property? And every single one of them, the response was yes. They never went to the mound. They never went towards it. Some of them people thought it was a bear mound or something like that, but they never really cared about it. Then, as I'm doing all this research, my brain one day clicked. I don't know if you remember there was not a documentary, but a program. It was called Paranormal, I think, and the episode was Wolfpack, the Palmyra case in Maine,
Where the family was being stalked on the farm.
Right. So when you look at that episode, and this just came to my head as I'm talking to all these different eyewitnesses, the family moved into a property. They were new to the property, right? The property had not, no one had been living there. They moved in, new family, new commotion. The daughter, I believe, with her boyfriend, spotted a mound in the back of the property. And the night after, or that night, is when they began to have their encounters. When that popped up, that kind of solidified everything else I was asking everybody else. It was the same scenario. But still, okay, so you have pups in the property. Why? Why would you make, you know, why would you make dens near homes? So all in all, as I began to, again, talk, and every single eyewitness was the same thing. It was the same answers, the same reply. I realized that these dogmen, the only way, even a fox, right? Let's say, and you've probably seen this, rather it be on social media, rather it be real life, or somebody you know. A fox does a den, a coyote does a den near homes. For whatever reason, maybe they feel safe in that area. Maybe there's no hunters near homes. Maybe they get that. Who knows? But for the most part, those coyotes or that fox have lived in that area for quite some time. And they feel comfortable with the people who live in that area. And to that point, to the extent where in the, you know, when the pups are young, these pups play in your backyard, right? So they feel comfortable. Mom feels comfortable letting these pups play in your backyard. They feel comfortable in that area. And that's that. The pups grow up, they move on, right? Sometimes there will be more pups in that area, but they feel comfortable there. So the question to me that sparked the curiosity was, well, wait a minute. So the only way for any living thing, because it could be a human, right? If you don't feel comfortable with your neighbor, you're not going to let your kids play outside unsupervised because you don't feel comfortable with your neighbors. So it goes in all aspects. So that should mean that the dogman had been living in this property for quite some time, and for whatever reason, feel comfortable with you. But what triggers the bad response if they're comfortable with you? So I had to ask another question. And most of these questions were all private questions. And some people would look at me, not look at me, but on the phone or on message, have a pause, or why you're asking me this. The question is, have you had bad experiences with arguments, divorce, sickness, whatever? And sure enough, every single one of them, the response was yes. Some of them were having a bad divorce. Some of them were having a death in the family. Some of them were having problems with rebellious teenagers. Some were, some of those factors all in between. Others were, they had just moved into the property, so now they're remodeling the property. So the change in the environment was causing the first response of the window peeking, the door being scratched, them being showing up, and you seeing them throwing rocks. And it just happens that the more the bad situations progressed, the more aggressive, and I'll use that word aggressive, they got towards the house or the property, because they wanted whatever was happening to stop, because, like the main case, they had a den in the property and they had pups. Because they had pups, they were protecting their offsprings from whatever situation was happening in your house that caused the imbalance in the environment. Interesting part about it is that in mostly every case, after the situation ceased to happen, the pups would all of a sudden show up, and they would frolic, and the owners would see them early in the morning running around the yard or whatnot, or just standing in the backyard or something next to the woods. So again, when the thing stopped, and that's where you kind of, if you're analyzing, okay, so this change in environment really was what was triggering the problem, because now that the problem was gone, the parents felt comfortable enough to allow a 4-foot tall pup to just be around your backyard. If there was no sense of comfort or not being afraid, they wouldn't have allowed that. No living creature would allow their offsprings, whether it be human or not, to be around somebody that they don't feel comfortable with. And this, again, throughout the years, the reply is always the same, the situation. So my questions are always those go-to questions. And sometimes they're, like I said, they seem private questions. But the reply is always the same. We had one from Maine, a case from Maine that I worked, which, again, there was a person in between. It was a biologist's friend who was having a problem with Dogman. And this Dogman was ripping her shingles off and was trying to make an entrance through the roof. And the questions all start the same. Well, what's going on in the house? And the response was, well, nothing's going on in the house. So kind of throws you off guard, because, well, nothing's happening. Why is the Dogman doing this? So I looked around. I asked the questions about the environment around, the topography and stuff like that. And I said, well, there's the possibility of this. What's going on? There's something going on in the house. And the biologist was a friend of the female that's having the problem. There's nothing wrong. It's like, you got to ask her if her son, because then I knew a day later that her son had moved into the house, and her son had gotten kicked out of the house of his house from his wife and went to live with his mom. So I told her, something's happening with her son. Ask her son if he's being abusive towards her. Ask her if her son is drinking alcohol, smoking pot, all these questions. I'm not going to ask her that. You got to ask her these questions. No, those are private questions. You got to ask her these questions if you want my help. And these conversations are all on Messenger, and saved, because I go back to different things that might happen or not happen, right, as references. So. And I actually, you got to ask her these questions if you want my help. I'm not asking her, okay, you want my help or not? Yes, but I'm not. And the last thing I told her was, I bet you any amount of money that the hole that the dogman is doing in top of the roof is over where he sleeps. That's what triggered her to ask her the questions that I want to ask her, because she went back, the biologist, and asked the simple question, hey, where's the hole? And when they realized, yes, the hole was being done over the son's bedroom. So she asked her the question, and sure enough, the son was an alcoholic, treated her like crap, would bring friends, and then would, do drugs in the backyard. And my simple reply was, she has to kick her son out the house, unless he's going to be gone anyways, because the dogman is doing what he wants to get to him. So she told the lady obviously being older, already living by herself, knew the son was a problem, kicked the son out. And sure enough, and again, I got confirmation over Messenger from this individual, once the son left, all her problems vanished. And the dogman would, after the son left, would like stand in the tree lines, watch her here and there, and then peacefully walk off. She never had a problem with him again. But that's how impactful our environments, when they have pups around, is to them. It's like a black bear. If you see a black bear far away, but you might walk peacefully, and the black bear might not do nothing. But if you start throwing rocks or yelling at the black bear, what's the black bear going to do? He's going to protect her their offsprings. And that became the why of why Dogman comes to properties. And then from there we researched other aspects, other areas, which led us to understanding that the bonding issue. There's some dogmen that bond to certain individuals from young, from when they're pup, and the person's a child, because they lived on the property, because they make dens on the property. Those offsprings grow up sometimes seeing a child there as well. So they get this attachment to that child, and they'll take balls, they'll take toys, they'll misplace things. So one of the questions that I'll ask when there's a father, for instance, and children, and the presence of a dogman is, have your child ever brought something into the home that you did not know what it was, rather it be a shiny stone or something? Has your child ever misplaced something that has not been found, and all of a sudden a month later it was at a place that you thought your child wasn't at? And again, the reply is always the same: yes. And so that, again, it gives you the way to more research, asking the proper questions, asking the questions that nobody ever thinks about, asking the questions that seem dumb. So, for instance, one of the questions, and you probably have heard in the community, about tobacco, dogman, liking tobacco. Okay. But then through research, you realize that there's a certain plants that go missing or go eaten or whatnot, in the property. And then when I started researching the ingredients of tobacco, you realize that tobacco, a lot of the tobacco is laced with something, and most of it is peppermint, mint, menthol, or whatnot. So for your basic individual, okay, peppermint, oh, but that's lavender, oh, but that's, catnip, or that's sage. They're all different plants. But when you look at the family, they're all from the same family. All those plants are all from the same family. So if they're all from the same family, they probably have the same components to it. So it's all attractive to them. And you'll find a lot of dogman, if you have fields of lavender or these plants, chances are you'll find a dogman near, if the environment is correct. So like I said, through these asking questions, investigating, and breaking things down, you'll figure a lot of things that others have not figured out. I've been able to also call in Dogman. The first time it was in Tennessee, actually, and how that happened was awkward because I had bought a Bluetooth speaker, both for myself, but also probably to try it out on the field. And I'm messing with it, and I'm on social media, and this noise came up. I won't mention the noise, but the noise came up, and it played, and it just I had in the house at that moment in time, I had two Chihuahuas and my 80-pound working bulldog, and all these guys, their curiosity sparked. The two Chihuahuas came running towards me, and they just wagged their tails, and they're looking at me, and they're listening to the sound. The bulldog begins to give this, this yapping sound, and I'm like, so I flew down to Tennessee, met up with a researcher, and the first night, we went out to a park, and I'm in a rental. So I put the Bluetooth on top of the car. It's about midnight, and I blasted the same sound in a sequence of of numbers, and sure enough, let's just say we have so much interaction that my coworker researcher wanted to leave, so we had to leave. Because it got spicy, not in a bad way. It was just I don't think the co-researcher at that moment in time was expecting it to work. Neither did I. But it did work. So we weren't expecting what happened to happen. So we left. But we tried it out again in 4 different other places. So 4 in total. So 3 other places in Tennessee in different parts. And we got a hit every single time. And when I say we got a hit, rather I saw it through my IR for a second or two. Rather something bipedal ran in and then ran back out. And you can clearly see, or eye shine at 6-7 feet off the ground. So I began to use that, and again you would say, well, this audio works, so I'm going to try it everywhere. But then I had to break everything down, and then another researcher who I respect so much, he gave me a little information, little tidbit, nothing that had nothing to do with my audio. Had nothing to do with my audio. He just gave me a little tidbit, and because he had experiences in Florida. And when I sat down and I replayed every hit that we got in Tennessee, I realized that the topography and the time frame was correct for every single one of them. So using that information, I duplicated that same results in multiple other states, looking for the same topography, same time frame, and the same audio. And the results were always the same. You'd always get a hit. So again, once you start duplicating it, you realize that you're proving, okay, this works, because every time I do it in different states, different areas, as long as the topography is the same, the landmarks or the topography that I'm looking for is the same, and the time frame is the same, they're going to be there. So meaning that in research, when I go out and research to have success, I will always look for these things, these marks, right? To really research and really investigate if you have cryptids in your property. There's a lot of things that we've done through the years, using the same mindset as you'd research, humans, as you research investigations in a prison setting, a criminal investigation, or, if you're doing zoological stuff, you use the same background. And it has always produced results. Until recently, again, we always look at Dogman, and I think this is how you and I got talking together, was because I mentioned about, I believe that their genotype is more cat-like than dog-like. And the reason I say that is there's a specific cat, which I'll say a tiger, tiger have kind of the same patterns that dogmen have at nighttime. So that's okay. Any animal can probably have the same patterns as any other. That's a more of an environmental thing, right? But there's some things that aren't environmental and aren't learned behavior. For instance, something I mentioned before, there's an eyewitness that I've talked to, probably 5-6 years. That individual has progressed from being scared to actually taking jogs in the area that they've been. And we can write a whole book on just her alone. When it comes to her experiences, her situations, the stuff that we've done, the stuff that she's done, everything. But long story short, one day she went on a jog, and she forgot her phone. Comes back to her car because she realized that the phone was ringing, because her husband, she has I'm assuming she has a smartwatch or something. But she goes back to the car. Oh, no, actually. She tapped herself, didn't realize that she had the phone on, and because her husband knew that her leg was bad, was going to be calling to make sure she was fine, she walked back to her car, and her phone had dropped from her pocket next to her car. When she came around the side of the car, the dogman was laying with the phone in between his front paws. That produced a specific sound as it got up to walk away. The sound, I spent probably some hours trying to look at specific sounds because the way she was describing it. And once I hit the tiger chuff, once she heard a tiger chuff, it was an automatic yes. That's what I was hearing from him. And there's on YouTube, you can find there was a guy from the UK who was in his tent, and you can hear this same chuff on the outside of the tent. It sounds like, have you ever heard or seen the movie Jurassic Park, the first one, the T-Rex rumble his throat?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the problem is, or not, when you look at how a tiger can do that rumble, is because of the structure of his throat. Canines do not have that structure, hence why they can't rumble like that. And that's a genetic thing. Cats, big cats, only specific big cats, because not all big cats can do that. Specific cats can do that. And again, it's because their structure, their genetic code, their structure genetically is designed to be able to produce that rumble, that chuff. Again, canines don't have their throats designed like that. That sparked an even bigger search and all the other behaviors that we've collected through the years. Simple things. How many canines are comfortable perched on top of a tree? None. You got dogs, domestic dogs that might climb a tree, right? They're going after something. If you look at breeds like the Walker Hound, they love climbing trees, and a lot of hounds love climbing trees after their prey. But they're going after something versus saying to themselves, well, you know what? I'm going to perch myself on top of that 50-foot branch just because. But yet a lot of dogmen are found or are seen perched on top of a large tree. There was an eyewitness that I spoke to, this part is interesting because big cats don't have a slit as your domestic cat has. So if you look at the pupil of a mountain lion, a lion, a tiger, it doesn't have that slit. Domestic cats have that slit. Foxes have that slit. Hyenas can have that slit to some extent. Not as pronounced as probably a fox, but But it's a quality that you would see your domestic cat in certain animals versus a dog. And there's other little things, other little behaviors, the sensitivity to sound. Cats can hear a lot better than dogs can. A lot better than dogs can. And they can pick up sounds below what you can even perceive it to be there. Same with foxes. Like foxes can hear a mouse under the ground, right? And their hearing is beyond what you could probably think of. And cats have that same ability. Normal canines don't. And there's a lot of other things. And it's all based on the structure, genetics. They're designed differently for a specific reason. So, and hence why this is why these little findings, and there's a lot of other findings, that you put them together and you realize, well, genetically, a dog is not designed like this. Genetically, a dog doesn't have this because it's a dog or a canine. The only animals that can have these types of genetic parts, for instance, the chuff, the rumble, are cats. You know, lions, tigers have it. I believe jaguars have it. Those, you know, and it's because their throats are designed that way. But only cats are designed that way. So again, these little things here and there, you put them together, you realize, well, wait a minute. Genetically inside, they're more cats or feline type than what you see on the outside, which is the phenotype. It's more canine. So I get my theory, my thoughts on that based on these little findings. And again, sure, I might have to do a blood test and have, to confirm 100%. But for me, a police officer, a detective goes out to investigate, an accident in the road, and he doesn't have to know 100% or being told by somebody that the individual is speeding, right? If he sees the skid marks, if he sees the length of the skid marks, the darkness of the skid marks, he will know that the individual is speeding, even if no one tells him. So they're a lot of people don't understand that, but what I'm trying to say is, if you collect the little data around it, you will get to the conclusion of what you need by it. And many people just throw these little things out the door, right? And even the roar. You'll hear a lot of eyewitnesses speaking or saying it roared. When have you ever been able to hear a dog roar? I don't care if your dog is 200, 300 pounds, right? Your vocals, if you don't have the proper vocals and the proper design, you're not going to roar.
They can growl, but it's not going to be a
roar,
yeah.
Right? Even your mountain lion doesn't roar, right? You have big cats roar, tigers, lions, right? Big cats roar, and their throats are designed to be able to push that. Like I said, again, all these little things are what when you sit down and really investigate. Forget about the fear factor. Forget about how the person is feeling. Forget about what he thought at the moment. Forget about all of that. Look at what's in front of you. Look at what the person is actually saying. And you'll realize that what some people might perceive of what was happening really wasn't what was happening, through the Dogman's eyes at least, because the response, the behavior was contradicting. And for instance, people will say, the Dogman wanted to eat me. It grinned at me. It showed me his teeth. It was threatening. But then it just turned around slowly and it walked away. So who was a threat to who? First of all, I walked away from you. And then if we look at behaviors in general, how many people smile when they're nervous or they're anxious? Many. Chimpanzees smile or show their teeth when they're anxious or nervous. Dogs will also grin and show their teeth when they're anxious or nervous. And what does a dog do, or cat does sometimes, or human, chimpanzee? It doesn't matter. You tend to slowly walk away from what's causing your stress. And the response has been the same. So when you look at other behaviors from other living creatures, and it could be, again, from humans to your cat and dog and everything in between, it's the same response. So the idea of, oh, Dogman is not afraid of nothing. No, every living creature is afraid of something, right? And it's afraid of certain things for whatever reason. That's just nature. That's just, everything has a fear in it, right? Those that don't have a fear, especially out in the woods, out in nature, normally don't survive very long. Because you can just imagine what would happen if a deer had no fear of a pack of wolves and just decided to go, buck wild on them. What's going to happen? It's going to be a dead deer, especially with a pack of wolves, right? You imagine if a cheetah decides to say, well, I have no fear, you're lying, I'm not going to take this food. What's going to happen? It's going to die, right? So every living creature has a fear and a sense of self-preservation. Everything does. Doesn't matter what it is. And those that don't eventually end up dead, right? And when you look at certain behaviors as people talk and as people, tell their stories, again, if you bypass their emotions, because obviously they're going to be scared. We understand that. But when we bypass that emotion, when we bypass the perspective of that they're giving out, just put that to the side. Listen to the story. Listen to what the Dogman is doing. Listen to what the person does and the response of the Dogman after, right? You will see a totally different story from what the eyewitness is saying based on his fear, his perception, and his thoughts in the day that it happened. Like you'll hear a lot of people say that it was running after me and I got away from him. But then you'll hear people saying that it was running at 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. It was running, at these incredible speeds. Well, then how can a human outrun a dogman? Impossible. So the thought of I got away really isn't true or a truthful perspective of what you think happened. The dogman just wanted you out and chased you out. Which, if you look at behaviors, if you have an intruder in your house or a trespasser, don't you run them off your property? Do you want to hurt them? Unless that happened, but normally you just scream at them, get out my property, and you might bluff or something, but the person runs off, that's it. A bear, bluff charges a lot. Animals, bluff charge, right? Domestic dogs that are bred to be defensive, quote, defensive, defending their property, will run towards a person, but if the person leaves the property, they go back into the property, right? Some dogs do that. So that tells you if you run away, that means there's something important about that area. And again, looking at through that aspect, then you, as a researcher, you start figuring out what is important about this area. Are there more here? Is there a den here? How many houses are around? Is there a river channel? Is there a connection? Is there this or that? Right? So when you go to research, you realize really quickly why that area was important. Whether you find a pile of dead animals, dead deer, or what, it doesn't matter, right? But you will find the why. But you have to bypass. You have to take away the emotion. You have to take away their perspective. Because again, when you're fearful and scared, your perspective might not be the correct one. And by doing this, again, we've had, and I say we because both the eyewitnesses that I've helped, the researchers, the teammates that I've been out in the field with, like we've never get a dull moment. And I have yet to have a person say, what you told me to do has failed. I don't know what else. It has never happened. I mean, if it has happened, the person hasn't told me. Right? Because again, once you are able to duplicate things and you realize that, okay, this is just the same pattern. And the same pattern goes throughout the US. So it's not that there's different patterns for different states. When it comes to genetics and how they go about, it's basically the same. I have to ask all different questions, but and tailor. The only thing you have to tailor differently is how the person responded in the first place. You have some people who are more peaceful. You have some people who start shooting. You have some people who just don't give a crap. So I have to tailor the solution to each person differently. Hence why I stopped giving solutions out in Facebook and social media, because you would have people who would take that. Oh, I heard Ricky told this person this and this, do this, this, and this. Like, no, I told that person to do this and this. I didn't tell you to do that, because your scenario is different.
So everyone's going to be
sorry.
different. I say
Right.
everyone's situation's different.
Right. But that's why I stopped giving, quote, advice over social media. Nowadays, if a person has a problem with a Dogman, they normally find me and message me, or find me and call me, and then I work their case. But it's not, I back then I used to, oh yeah, do this or do that. And like I said, there's a lot of people out in the community who are there just for the fun of it, who are there for just the recognition. So they'll take people's work and make it their own. And I wasn't having it, because you can get hurt. If you take my advice, or somebody takes the advice that I gave to somebody else and you apply it, well, it might be that your problem is different, and all you're doing is irritating the Dogman, right? So now you get a worse reaction, right? And then it's not my fault. Well, I told that person. That person is not you. And some people did not understand that, because they're looking at it as a dumb animal. They're like, no. Time out. This is not a bear. This is not a coyote. This is not a wolf. This is not a lion. You're talking about a living creature with the intelligence to understand what you want the first time you want it. And by that I mean is, if for instance, and this is a illustration, an example. I'm not trying to say this is exactly what I'm trying to say, the exact scenario, but to illustrate how smart they are in comparison to your domestic dog, right? I might have to take a dog and put him on a sit position multiple times with a command before he realizes that command produces or is what I want him to do. Right? It'll work faster if I give him a treat or something, right? But he's not. I have to do it multiple times, right? And it's gonna take a lot of repetitions for him to get it the first time without me having to touch him, right? I can be in front of a Dogman. This is how smart they are, and I can say, sit, and me sit down. He will already know what it means, right? Doesn't mean that they can talk. It simply means the word that came out your mouth is that. For them, that's one and done. And if they live next to you, they will pick up on every movement you've done, every vocal that you've done, everything that you've said, right? Because they live next to you. So you have some people that said, "Oh, the Dogman said this." He was mimicking what he's been hearing from you all the time, right? So we have one Dogman that mimicked a lady's name, her nickname, which was a short nickname. But every time she would go outside in the woods, it would say the name. Well, it was the name her kids and her husband would call her, right? Not for any malicious intent. It's just the fact that they do it. So you're out here, I'm going to do it too. We have some that have. There's an individual in Ohio, for instance, that the Dogman would go under his cabin. So he would have some certain things right in front of the door that led to under the cabin. The Dogman would take the things out, go in to get under the cabin, and then when they would come back out, they would attempt, again, I say attempt because it wasn't perfect, but they would attempt to put everything back the way they took it out, right? Just like any other ape would attempt to do the same thing. That's how it was never perfect, but you can tell the intelligence of, okay, this was here, this was here, this was here, this was here. And this goes on top of this, and this goes on top of that. It was never perfect. But again, if they're observing, their observation skills, they will pick up on everything you do and everything you don't do and how you do things. We had one in Minnesota mimicking the kids laughing as they get out of the school bus from the top of a ridge. Because it would sit there every day when the kids would come out to watch the kids play, to watch the kids come out of the school bus. And all it ever heard was the kids laughing, right? So the landowner, property owner, would hear the same laughter from that spot on the ridge, which would spark the curiosity, because in his mind, why the kids are down there? Why am I hearing laughter up there? And sure shit enough, one of the alpha females was the one that was there, sitting there on a specific time frame every day when the school bus came, laughing or mimicking the kids when they came out of the school bus. So their ability, their intelligence is very high. Hence why what I tell you to do for your property, it will be specific towards you and only you, not to anybody else. And again, that's why I step back from giving it specific advice to people out on social media.
What do you think these things actually are? Like, for the intelligence, the way they are, obviously it's just a theory, but where would they be at on the evolutionary terms from, like, obviously there's no upright walking dogs throughout evolution, or canine, and even feline. Like, there's nothing that ever really walks around on two legs. Obviously there's bear that can do that occasionally, but it's not like they can run on them and everything else. Like, people report these things running on 2 feet. I've never seen a dog run on 2 feet, so I don't know. Do you have any opinions on where they actually come from?
Where they come from, I've never really sat down to study that, right? Again, I was a father who had Dogman on the property, so my goal was always to research behaviors to both keep myself safe and through the years keep other people safe, and just know the phenomenon. So where they came from wasn't really of interest to me. I never really put my thoughts on it. What I will tell you this, right? I will say this. Many people will read books, will read myths and legends and whatnot, and attribute Dogman to these myths and legends, right? I do not believe that these myths and legends are Dogman at all. At least not Dogman that we know. Many people in the Native community, I'll say a lot of the older, elders in the Native community will tell you it's a skinwalker. But if you really want to ask questions, they're not going to talk about skinwalkers because it's a superstition. So there's not much you're going to get from history when it comes to that aspect because of superstition. Yet when new generation sees a Dogman and they know what a skinwalker is, they will literally tell you off the bat, these are two different things. And I have messages from Native Americans who will outright say, these are not the same thing as a skinwalker. This is an animal, a creature, right? A flesh and blood thing, versus what they know as a skinwalker, which is a person who has special powers to do certain things. But one thing that doesn't correlate or doesn't click with me when it comes to the Dogman has been around for as long as mankind has been around, right? As some people say, is this. And I want the audience to listen to this carefully. Let's take Bigfoot. Bigfoot is found in every culture, every country, every oral history, right? Throughout the world, from Alaska to Canada to the United States to Australia to Russia, to the Himalayas to China, you have a hairy bipedal humanoid creature. Stories of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout. So when you find all these stories, you can easily see and realize, okay, cool. Then when people tell you that Bigfoot or these things have been around for as long as mankind has lived, you can really believe that, right? Because why? Because every country, nation, has a story of a upright bipedal humanoid. Why is it that not every country has a story of an upright walking canyon? If not every country, and to give you a country off the top of my head, Australia, when you speak to, the Aborigine people there is no oral history of an upright walking canine. So how can a creature that has been throughout the world, throughout mankind, not be found in certain countries, in certain areas? Then you look at how is it that some Native Americans, via text that I've talked to, will tell you, no, we don't have any oral history of this, of what I saw, this. But apparently, a tribe, right? A nation, however, right? Next to it has on the same state, right? So if I take one tribe of Native Americans, like for instance, Wisconsin has a lot of different Native Americans that lived in the state of Wisconsin, right? So to illustrate it, how is it that one tribe, tribe of Native Americans from one area has oral history of a supposed dogman, which I'm assuming it's the skinwalker, but yet the tribe next to it doesn't? Because if I have one and one, I have to have one and the other. Because in nature, animals travel, creatures travel, things travel, right? So if how can I have stories of so-called dogman in one and not have stories of dogman in the other? That, to me, that's ludicrous. It tells me that I have to research what you call dogman. And so far up to date, it's not dogman, it's skinwalker. And even in Tennessee, when you talk about dogman, people in Tennessee will tell you, oh, that's a skinwalker, because that's what they hear. No, they're two different things, right? And said by some, I'll say some, right? But from a few Native Americans that have seen a dogman, know what a dogman is, but also know and understand what a skinwalker is. So the idea of them being around as long as mankind has lived, for me, is a solid no. For me, is a solid no. Now, at what point in time did they come, or were they here, or what happened? I can't tell you. There is a biopsy that was done on an eyewitness that was scratched. Yeah. Was it a scratch? No. Unfortunately, it wasn't a scratch. It was a lick. This is the same eyewitness that I've been talking for 5 or 6 years already, and that we can write a book on. They work in search and rescue and law enforcement and this and that. So She had gone to Germany for the floods down there. For some time, she got injured down there. She got some scrapes and some wounds and whatnot. She came back, so she was kind of like on leave from work, trying to get herself healed up. And so they went out with their family to a park, a lake, and she had to use the bathroom. So she goes into the bushes, squats to use the bathroom, and she feels fur from behind. She's assuming it's just a stray dog or something. She doesn't really pay much attention to it. But then it licked one of her wounds, which had stitches. And when she felt the lick, it was porous, like a cat, which again is interesting. Dogs don't have porous tongues. Cats do. It felt porous, and for her, time out. If it's a dog, it doesn't have that type of tongue. And when she turned around. She saw it walk away, run off. So she saw the tail end of it running off back into the brush. Literally speaking, and I'm going to say this as a joke, but this was literally, it scared the piss out of her. Meaning, she wasn't able to use the bathroom for a while because she was still scared days later. But they did a biopsy on that wound because it just happened that wound. I can show you pictures of the wound, and I can ask you, and I've asked doctors and I've asked nurses to show them the picture and explain to them. And the question I asked to them is, how old do you think this wound is? And their response all the time is between 4 to 6 months old. It's already been, covered, it's healed, blah, 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 this and that. And the minute I say, what if I tell you this wound is only a week old? Yeah. Their response is completely flabbergasted because, well, what do you mean? Like, no, this is not even, this is not 4 months old. So the doctors over there did a biopsy, and the biopsy came back with multiple things, but it included a bacteria that is found, obviously, in cats and dogs. And the other one is found in humanoids. So by that, ape meaning anything that is linked to apes or humans. So ape, chimpanzee, gorillas, we have that same bacteria in our mouth. But besides that, I can't tell you anything else, right? I mean, that's what was found in the wound of her biopsy that was licked. What these things are, like you said at one point, until I have a dead body and be able to physically do a blood test on it and whatnot, we'll never know what it is. Where they come from, I don't know. Have they been around through eons with humans? My answer to that is absolutely not. Besides that, I don't know how to answer that question.
No, that's fine. I don't expect anyone to really know 100%. So what I've said before is like, I don't think anyone really has all the answers when it comes to
No.
what these things are. And the people that claim they do, I always take with a grain of salt, because unless they've actually have the body and done all the research and scientific evidence to prove exactly what they are, it's all just assumptions.
Right. But and I 100% agree with you. And there's some people that work more on history and stories and books. There's a lot more people that just go off of what they hear on the internet. But there's a few of us, and I see a few, it's not a lot, that have actually done a lot more of the work on the field than what most people would think. And there's some things that can lead you to a more educated answer over something, especially when you're, trying to duplicate the results. But when it comes to that, like I said, once I don't really study that part yet. But what I do find is that not all countries, not all tribes, not all nations have oral stories of them. So how is it that not all of them have oral stories, and yet they've been here as long as mankind lives. But you say the same thing about Bigfoot, and every nation, every country, every tribe, every place has a story of an upright walking bipedal humanoid. So that in itself, for me, sparks that. Why I say that? No. Well, besides that, like, all I can really tell you is when it comes to behavior wise, that I can, because that's what I've put my work on, is behavior wise. I mean, we have different audios. They'll chuckle like a hyena and then howl afterwards. There's so many different audios. They'll chirp like birds. Cats do it. The clicking sounds. Now their own nails click on the floor of concrete, but they also make a clicking sound with their mouth, which again cats do. Some dogs can probably do it, but it doesn't sound the same. Audio wise, mom has a different audio when it's calling the pups. There's a sound of, using the Avengers assemble type. So when the Dogman does a certain audio, normally you'll have all the rest of them come towards that audio. Mom, once she calls, doesn't move on. She calls, and until they get to her, then they move. They will synchronize each other through audio on what to do. So every audio, every vocal means something. Their vocals are very complex. They can hit two notes at the same time. And again, this is all through field research and audio collection and behavioral collection.
Whatever recordings you have, if you would like to send those to me, I can add them to this episode for anyone out there listening so they can hear them.
I can send you a few of them. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. But yeah, it's their mimicry is good. Now, I'll tell the audience is this: they're not perfect. They do make mistakes. And once you learn certain specific behaviors, you can catch what some of those mistakes are sometimes. For instance, one mistake that was in my property, and yeah, I have Dogman and Bigfoot on my property, was at 1:00 in the morning, you'd hear what a person would call a bird chirping, right? A specific chirp. And you would say, oh, cute, nice, right? But then you hear the same bird at 7:00 in the morning. The problem is that if the bird is up at 7:00 in the morning, it should be roosted somewhere sleeping at 1:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So they're mimicking, and that's where when I realized they were mimicking the 7:00 bird, but they were mimicking at 1:00 in the morning. They didn't realize that, hey, buddy, as a human, I know that you're supposed to be sleeping, not up and about. So they do make mistakes. And if you're able or know enough, you can catch on these mistakes and then sure enough, make your research more successful. There's a whole bunch. Like I said, I'll look through and send you some. so you can hear them out and attach to the podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm sure the audience would like that too, but I think we can wrap this one up. Is there anything before you get off here that you'd like the audience to know?
Well, Dogman isn't inherently aggressive. Dogman, and when I say inherently aggressive, is they are not born waking up wanting to kill humans. They do sometimes if the pup is small and the human, as a child, they do sometimes create bonds, which last a lifetime. But they're not, they respond aggressively towards the human aggression. Some people just live their lives thinking that they are able to do whatever they want with nature, and nature always fights back. And a lot of times, if you break down stuff, their response was dictated by the human's response. So there's no need to really be fearful, be respectful, be cautious. They can be dangerous, right? Keyword, can be dangerous. And obviously, if you run into an area that they call important, your best bet is just to walk away, leave, right? Just leave. Don't do nothing dumb. Don't do nothing because you want to, have the $1 million shot or whatever. Just leave. And just be mindful of your surroundings when it comes to how you respond. Always remembering that their response is based on your response. And sure, you might have a rogue. Every animal, every creature, every living thing, they'll have rogues, right? But the key note here is they do not wake up every day wanting to harass people or to kill people. That is not the case.
Well, you give us a lot to think about, a lot to look into. So I do appreciate that. And I know you're on a Facebook group. Do you want to plug your Facebook group for anyone that wants to get in contact with you?
Well, yeah. The actually, let me see if I can. For contacting me personally, you can. I'll give my email. tmdk9s@yahoo.com. That'd be the safest spot. That way you can just send me an email if you're having a situation or a problem. And the email comes in straight into my phone. So once it comes in, I'll see the notification and respond back.
I'll include that in the show notes for anyone out there listening.
Yeah.
Well, Ricky, I appreciate you coming on here this morning and talking with me. It's been a pleasure. Been
Same here.
Very interesting. Dogman's always been something that's made me curious, especially after seeing something that I couldn't explain. So I've always been fascinated with the whole Dogman topic. So, but now I want to thank you and hope you have the rest of it or a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.